Think about what our landscapes would look like without conifers. As specimens mature, they lend a certain prestige to the landscape. But come late fall, when all the plants in our gardens look barren, we appreciate our conifers more than ever. What features can a conifer connoisseur count on to delight the eye and lift the winter blues? Well, to begin with, how about the color blue? Yes, of course, there's the familiar Colorado blue spruce in all its dwarf, intermediate, or large iterations, but many varieties of pine, fir, and juniper also offer exceptional blue color. Then packing even more punch, we have the high-octane yellows, of which I recommend using just one because it can go a long way. Of course, the deep greens and blue greens should not be overlooked either. Just bear in mind that every evergreen plant will lose a bit of its luster come winter. That's normal. What is not normal? Check out these elusive purples and bronzes. You don't get that color until winter comes along. Every coniferite would say one of the most rewarding aspects of gardening with conifers is the variety of growth habits they offer. You can take your pick from weeping fountains, strict columns, abstract living sculptures, globes, or carpets to create your own living art gallery. Some are just plain funky, but don't let that stop you. They can end up being the funnest companions in your garden. Nothing puts us in the holiday spirit more than evergreen boughs and cones, so of course we have to talk cones. By late fall, the cones on pine, spruce, Douglas fir, hemlock, and arborvitae have dried out, and in many cases opened to release their seed for the season. But against the sparse winter landscape, the gardener's curiosity is rewarded upon closer inspection of these little reproductive marvels. In a class of its own, the woody center of cones on junipers are sealed in a thick covering of white or even blueberry blue wax. This earns them the popular designation berries, but don't go mixing them into your berry cobbler just yet. Besides their really pungent flavor, as the wax dries, they get harder and harder. You don't want any unplanned visits to the dentist. Last but not least, some conifers are planted for one reason and one reason only: their exceptionally ornamental bark. Though it's now plagued by several disease and insect problems, Scotch pine was traditionally planted for its flame orange bark. Japanese red pine is equally impressive, though just about as appetizing to unwelcome guests. The best chance of success on either of these species is to plant them in full sun, far away from any tall plant neighbors, and expose them to as much wind as possible. For more protected space, you might select a showstopper like this lacebark pine. At first glance, that bark looks just like the US military's World War II camo pattern. While our infantry may have used their camo to blend in, it makes this ornamental rock star of a conifer stand out. It might surprise you to know that we can grow two different species from the redwood family here in central Illinois, though not the ones you might be thinking. Even more surprising, they are both deciduous conifers. You got it. There is such a thing as conifers that lose their leaves every autumn, same as our broad-leaved shade trees. True to their name, these two redwoods, called the bald cypress and dawn redwood, have reddish undertones peeking through the bark. Both species can eventually grow to become some of our largest trees in the landscape, not surprising given their pedigree. In fact, the current champion tree in Illinois is a bald cypress. Imagine how gruff that bark would sound. But even a visit to see mature specimens in ISU's Fell Arboretum will show you that all the buttressing on these trunks adds character as the tree ages. Then finally, we come to our only native conifer here on the tallgrass prairies, eastern red cedar. That name is a little deceptive because this tree is actually a juniper. But this plant's strongest asset might be its cinnamon brown peeling bark. The bark really peels. You'd think a cat used it as a scratching post. Well, that cat must be an artist then, because the result is a masterpiece. The vivid foliage, funky forms, Cones and showy bark offered by conifers let gardeners turn up the heat in the winter garden. So do your future winter self a favor and plant a few exciting conifers this year.